What does FNAF Help Wanted 2 hide from you in the Fazcade Minigames? In Help Wanted 2, there are dozens of fun and terrifying challenges to play through, ranging from a harmless game of Banaban to the grim remnants of a burnt-down Fazer Blast. There's really a game for everyone in the Fazcade. Whether or not you survive them, though, that's up for debate. In this video, we'll be taking a look behind the scenes and out of bounds at these spooky carnival minigames, to not only see how they work, but also to find things we're not meant to see. Like, did you know there's hidden dev text in the Bonnie Bowl minigame? And how does the seemingly infinite train work in Fazer Blast? There's lots to see and of course break, so I hope you enjoy today's look behind the scenes of Help Wanted 2. And while we'll be bashing and shooting our way to victory in these minigames, you can also be doing the same in Dying Light 2, the sponsor of today's video, which is now 60% off until January 2nd. If fighting zombies and parkour is your thing, then Dying Light 2 is right up your alley. You play as Aiden, who is searching high and low for his lost sister within this open-world zombie game. There's plenty to explore and discover, but just be careful as night sets in, as things get a bit intense to say the least. Play solo or co-op with 3 friends to survive the horrors that await you. The holiday season has swept into the city with the return of the Winter Tales Gifts from Above event, where some seasonal bounties will yield some cool items and other goodies. So if you're ready to put your survival skills to the test, dive headfirst into Dying Light 2 before January 2nd to pick it up for 60% off by clicking the link in the description below. And a big thanks to Techland for supporting me as a creator. Because we're doing multiple minigames, I'll be recapping each one as we get to it instead of doing one massive recap. So as we begin the Fazcade Minigames, the first we'll play is Banaban. This game is pretty straightforward. We'll wield our trusty mallets and smack away the onslaught of puppets popping out of the machine. In order to complete each level, you have to reach a certain threshold of points, hitting Bonbon and Bonnet while avoiding Helpy, who will take away points instead. In the following rounds, plush babies will begin spawning, and you'll have to hit them 3 times to avoid a jump scare. So restarting this minigame, we can switch the lights on and have a look around this area. Within the map, there are several arcade machines that surround you, although something you'll quickly realize is that this area is a bit grim for a family arcade. This whole place looks a bit gloomy, which would make sense considering this minigame technically takes place in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. Even worse, we're trapped in here forever. The hallway behind the machine just leads into the void, and the door behind us was only a simulation and never led anywhere at all. So the only way to get out of this is to bonk some bonds. Speaking of which, the player doesn't really exist either. We're only a floating pair of clubs that were trained in the art of destroying bonbons. We also don't obey the laws of time, since one of our clubs moves regularly in bullet time and the other lags behind. With the game started, we can now take a look at how these puppets appear before facing the wrath of our mallets. As you can see, they just kind of pop into view from our usual perspective, but from inside the machine, we can see that they'll appear out of our sight and fly up through the holes. Something I find super creepy is the fact that they'll always focus their head on the player camera. That means by detaching the camera and moving it around, they'll follow it with their heads no matter where it goes, including behind and beneath them. We can also watch in bullet time as we give them a good wallop, and when the mouth connects with Bonbon's head, some metallic debris will appear as they snap into their hit animation. After a moment, they'll duck back down into the hole and unload completely. As I said earlier, if a plush baby appears and you don't hit them in time, they'll actually jump scare you and force you to restart the minigame. As is consistent with these minigames, the jump scare model is stored outside the level in a double-faced sphere, meaning we can't see inside if we're outside, and we can't see outside if we're inside it. I wouldn't say Plush Baby's jump scare is the scariest of them all, but she definitely has the spirit. She even T-poses afterwards. That's gotta count for something. Since we've met our plushie demise, we might as well take a look at the game over screen while we're here. There really isn't much to see other than hanging tubes and wiring from above us, despite not connecting to anything at all. The entire screen itself takes place on a large checkered floor, and the table occupies very little space. It's honestly pretty unnerving. Back inside the minigame, we can get our revenge on Plush Baby, and her animations are similar to the others. She reels back, but she toughs out 2 more hits before leaving. Once again, she just ducks out of sight and unloads, biding her time to come back and annoy us again. As if things weren't hard enough as it is, this minigame has a hard mode version called Bonkaban Bonus Round. When the game starts, you'll immediately realize that the lights aren't coming on. We're playing this one in the dark, but no matter, I'm still getting me mallet. On round 3, a pair of creepy eyes will appear to distract you, eventually leading to the bonus round. A glitch trap puppet can appear now, and if we hit it, the game enters tilt mode, requiring some rewiring before we can continue. With the lights turned on, we'll see that this map is practically identical to the original, although the machine we play on has changed a bit on the inside. What I'm more interested in are the eyes seen on round 3. Up close, we'll find that these guys are just a couple of black spheres with pupils in the center, and they'll basically just hover inside the hole to trick the player. During this bonus round, this little glitch trap puppet will appear as a sort of stage hazard. It's just as creepy as I'd expected with the lights on, but what about the arm holding it up? Taking a look inside the machine, you'll see that the arm isn't attached to anyone or anything. It's just a floating limb inside of an arcade machine. Nothing to see here, folks. When hit by the player, he'll slide down into the hole and unload, though he's actually still visible up above when this takes place. When the tilt mode activates, the main play area flips up to reveal some disconnected wires and a code that we'll need to use to repair the machine. Our trusty clubs will unload during this sequence, only to reappear afterwards as the puppets begin their assault once again. Also, if we take a look inside the machine, the wires and plugs you reattached during this sequence have vanished. When the minigame came to an end, I was a bit surprised to find that I was not where I should be. During this after game screen, I was several yards from the prize machine, and so I couldn't collect my prize or press the buttons on the table. I'm not sure if this is because I messed with the player camera or something else, but it's a huge bummer. But with that said, let's dive into the next minigame, DJ Music Time. In this minigame, we'll be following the footsteps of the master himself, DJ Music Man, to create some straight up bops. After approaching our DJ station, he'll play a song and display some visuals on our setup. And our goal is to recreate that song using the various tools at our disposal. In the advanced mode, we'll also employ the use of a Faz camera to stop the mini music men who appear in the tunnels around the player. Here we have more rounds to complete and less time to manage them, making this task a lot harder than the previous. Of course, if our musical talents fall short of his expectations, we'll be jump scared by Music Man. So first and foremost, we can take a closer look at our wise teacher before starting the minigame. And from beyond the black barrier, we can see him lying down peacefully in this giant tunnel. He's a bit too large for this area though, so part of his body sticks out of bounds. He's a lot less terrifying while he's peacefully taking a snooze. But that comfort is unfortunately short-lived. While looking at this monstrous animatronic, I saw a pair of hand feet down the void space below. Hilariously, Music Man is so big, his jump scare model doesn't fully fit inside of his jump scare sphere. And speaking of which, this is what his jump scare animation looks like from another angle, followed by his A pose immediately after. There's additionally a model for the mini Music Man out here, and this is certainly one of the stranger T-poses I've ever seen. And of course, we can watch their scare sequence play out as well. Now as we start the minigame, we'll watch as this gargantuan DJ wakes from his nap and begins crawling out into the studio. I thought it'd be less intimidating watching this from another angle, but no, he is still just as terrifying. Maybe even more so now that we can see how small the room is in comparison. Lucky for us, DJ Music Man loves a good groove, and so we can avoid certain death if we make some sweet jams. We will have no audience today, but we can take a peek inside of these side rooms where we'll find a couch and some posters, as well as a little Freddy plush. Despite there being a second window above each of these viewing rooms, there is no second floor, meaning they serve no real purpose. Now let's turn our attention to our mixing booth. So during our playthrough, various images will appear on screen to help us reconstruct the chosen song. But this is no ordinary screen. Actually, this isn't a screen at all. The visuals we use to make our sweet mixtape are actually floating within a black compartment, and this dark box extends beyond the back of our audio mixing gear. These various effects are layered a bit strangely, and not everything here is visible from all angles, so it's definitely best to stay in your station. That being said, let's jump into the advanced night and continue our flourishing music career. So during this level, we'll be interrupted during our practice by the obnoxious clatter of the mini music men, and the Faz camera is used to scare them off. When they appear, these enemies just blink into existence beyond the walls of the studio and slide through these small purple tubes, clanging their cymbals to announce their presence. If we don't scare them off in time, they'll briefly wind up and then spring into the air, falling on top of you and triggering the jump scare we looked at earlier. Just like the puppets in Banaban, this animatronic follows you with their head as you move around. And so, when the jump scare triggered, they look directly at the wall since we are now outside the map. In this game's hard mode version, the studio has fallen into disrepair, and that includes includes our gracious host, Music Man as well. The minigame plays out mostly the same here, although it's a lot more difficult with the addition of a new switch on our board. Not only this, but a mini Music Man can appear behind our board and stomp on our controls, making it nearly impossible to complete the challenge. As we restart this minigame, we can take a look at how the map has changed around us. The entire place has badly decayed and is now covered in a layer of rust and grime. What's funny about this is that the side rooms are actually unchanged. They're just as clean and vibrant as ever, and it's only the windows that appear dirty and ruined. During this night, this mischievous mini can appear from behind our station and provide us with an unwanted remix. At first I couldn't figure out where this enemy was appearing from, but eventually I learned that they appear in a T-pose directly behind you, quickly sliding beneath us and through our booth as they begin climbing on top. There are a variety of minis you can encounter on this level, but this one, who lacks any external pieces, is probably the creepiest. Although they're not actively loaded in at the same time, each of these mini Music Men has a jumpscare model stored out of bounds, including this terrifying creature here. Now, as for DJ Music Man, he is not in the best shape of his career. His teeth are destroyed, and the left side of his head has been badly damaged, resulting in a pretty terrifying animatronic as his endoskeleton is now visible. Seeing this character is pretty cool though, since to my knowledge, this is the first time we've seen a ruined Music Man. Despite the hardship, he remains dedicated to the sweet vaporwave bangers. That's it for this minigame though, so now it's time to hit the lanes in the next level, Bonnie Bowl. In Bonnie Bowl, we'll be playing a pretty standard 10 frames of bowling, though there are a few hazards in our path. Every couple of frames, a new obstacle will activate with the intention of stopping our perfect game. These can be as simple as a couple of disembodied Monty heads blocking the lane, or even the pin setter slamming its jaws down as it mercilessly approaches you. After all 10 frames are complete, the minigame comes to an end, if you survive, that is. Restarting this minigame, the first thing I did was fly up into the ceiling to take a look at Moon, but he was apparently late getting to work. Only his hat was present, and it stays floating here until he becomes active and peeks down at the player. After loading in, he'll lean forward and stare us down from the hole above until we shine the flashlight on him. He then slinks back out of sight and freezes in place. Because we can be killed by Moon if we don't ward him off, we can also find his jumpscare model T-posing out of bounds. While exploring outside the map, I noticed there was a copy of the ball return floating directly beneath the map. Inside of it, there are several bowling balls, and the functionality of this object is pretty interesting. After rolling the ball and knocking out some pins, the ball isn't unloaded like I expected, but instead, it's warped back into the ball return underneath the map. Then, as the next frame loads in, the bowling balls are taken from out of bounds and teleported into the return inside the level. A pretty neat trick to create the illusion of a functional ball return. By this point, the pin setter started barreling down the lane at me, and though there isn't really anything to see off camera in this specific sequence, it's still terrifying. It makes me super anxious. Forget all this horror business, I'm going back to Wii Sports Bowling. Though the sequence itself is pretty basic, there's a hidden secret within Bonnie's massive head that you can't typically see. Each hole inside the triangular pin holder has a numerical value starting from the front. After the first frame is completed, each of these values resets to a 0, and it never changed back during my playthrough. On the topic of hidden developer text, looking out of bounds next to the pin setter, we'll find two instances of the word text floating on top of each other. At first I thought this was left over by accident, and it didn't serve any purpose, but I later found out that the bottom text changed to say turn 1 after I played the first frame. I thought the number would go up as I played more of the game, but all the following frames still said turn 1. Next, there's something super interesting hidden out of bounds that I don't believe ever shows up in game. Hovering out of bounds is a wheel that appears to be hanging from a chain. On it are 4 icons: a green bowling ball, Monty, Moon, and what appears to be a person with a rotation symbol, each representing a different hazard. Typically, we can see which hazard is coming as it appears on the screen up above, but I don't believe this was originally meant to be the case. If we throw the ball while out of bounds, we can see that after 2 frames, this wheel will lower down and switch to one of the 4 pictured obstacles before reeling back up. The Monty Moon options are accurate, but the other 2 don't exactly make sense as far as I can understand them. When the pin setter goes on the attack, the wheel remains unchanged, which leads me to believe this was a functionality that was abandoned at some point in development. Continuing on to the other obstacles, the next I want to take a look at were the Monty heads that pop in through these doors. When this hazard becomes active, the heads will appear just beyond the floor that extends past the map's walls. There is no body attached to these frightening reptilian heads, and their neck is really just the back of their head, stretched really far. What's most funny about these guys is that after retracting out of sight, they'll quickly turn over on their side and lay here until they reactivate. They seem pretty intimidating from afar, but we can warp the player inside their path and remain unharmed, even when their gaping jaws of death fly through us. Another enemy we'll face here is Plush Baby, and she drops down from the vent above. After landing and situating herself, she'll begin running at the player, and you'll have to hit her with a bowling ball to avoid getting jump scared. From another angle, this whole thing is absolutely hilarious. She gets pummeled by the ball and sticks to it while rolling down the lane, blasting away the pins with her face and unloading. Glorious! Finally, I want to try moving the player around the map while bowling to see what would happen. I moved myself directly in front of the pin setter and managed to play mostly unhindered, which resulted in a pretty easy strike. After that, I got comfy on the couch with the animatronic plushies, and when I threw the ball, it sadly hit the side of the lane, resulting in a wasted roll. That's it for our adventures in Bonnie Bowl, so now we'll jump into the last of the Fazcade Minigames, Fazer Blast. In this classic carnival-style game, you'll wield your trusty Fazer Blaster and shoot at the targets passing by. Carney is watching, so you have to try your best to keep the Dreadbear meter in the green. Otherwise, you're as good as dead. There are 5 levels to this minigame in total, which we'll be covering in the order we play them. Restarting this level, I started by moving the camera around the level, getting a good look at our pal Carney in the process. He's just standing in this tiny room all to himself, and looking all kinds of sinister in the process. Things get even creepier as we take a look around the level, which is coated in this thick layer of eerie green fog. I saw something floating a great distance from the rest of the level, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a ball, just sort of floating out here. Technically, it was multiple. It flickered between yellow and red, an effect caused by these 2 objects fighting to occupy the same space. These balls will be used in the following levels, but not this first one. So it's a bit peculiar finding them here. With the lights on, we can get a much better look at the location this level takes place in, and besides a few trees and some level dressing, it's pretty barren. That being said, let's take a look at the Fazer Blast minigame itself. Before even starting the game, we can move the camera beyond the red curtain to find a ton of assets already occupying the interior. To start, the back wall is a constantly looping animation of some stars passing by, which helps sell the illusion of movement during the game. On either side of the stage, we can find various assets stacked and clipping through each other, ranging from the dozen of asteroids, the animatronic cast, and several Lulz Hacks robots floating near the ceiling. That's only the tip of the iceberg too, since below the stage we'll find a ton of star-shaped targets waiting to be activated. While the minigame is being played, these stars will light up and begin rising upwards, passing through the player's sight and freezing once out of view. Some of these objects aren't even stored within the minigame stand itself, and because of this we can find a backdrop, some planets, and more of our main cast currently occupying the space beyond the minigame and out of our sight. It's better to preload these objects when initially entering the level to avoid a lag spike if they just appeared, and because there are so many of them passing by, it makes more sense to have them already spawned in and ready to be moved. As I said before, Carney doesn't like when players fail to keep the Dreadbear meter up in the safe zone. Because of this, we can find his jumpscare model floating beneath the level, and he's in a pretty strange pose too. I expected a T-pose, which is typical in these cases, but instead, he's in this strange, you must be this tall to die pose. We can then view his jumpscare in bowl time, which is pretty spooky, and oh, there's a T-pose. Glorious. In the following level, we'll be playing basically the same minigame, although the setting has changed from outer space to the western frontier. We're not only using the Fazer Blaster this time either, we now have a basket full of what looks like colorful softballs as well, and we'll use these to hit the large targets that appear during the minigame. To make things even more difficult, a box containing Plush Baby will appear, meaning you'll have to hit her with the Fazer Blaster anytime she pops into existence. Once again, we can restart this minigame and flick the lights on for a better look. First, we can look beyond the stage and find a ton of objects waiting to be pulled into the main gameplay area. There are multiple backdrops, targets, and even the chair holding Plush Baby just kinda chilling back here. Inside the wagon, there are a handful of different objects in place as well, waiting for the player to start the minigame so they can begin moving. For the most part, the functionality of this level remains the same as before. The objects stored outside the gameplay area will be moved inside as needed. What I was really curious about is a train that appears to move endlessly throughout the stage midway through the minigame. From behind the scenes, we can watch as the train cars pass through the stage as intended, exiting through the wall where the player can't see them, and then moving back to their starting location. After they reach the other side, they'll slide back through the wall and start this process over again, which is a really clever way of pulling off this effect. Next, when we release the Plush Baby hidden behind this gift box, the level goes dark around us as she vanishes. From another angle, we can see that this is no ordinary darkness, but in reality, it is a large double-faced sphere that encapsulates the player and then fades out as the curtains close. From this point forward, Plush Baby can now appear in a random location somewhere in the play area, meaning you have to shoot her with a Fazer Blaster to avoid dying before the challenge is complete. That's really it for the Western level, so let's head into the first of this game's hard mode levels. In total, there are 3 hard mode minigames for Fazer Blast, each of them inspired by the first 3 Five Nights at Freddy's games. In the FNAF 1 level, we'll be given a third weapon, the dart gun. and now must use all 3 tools to play through a recreation of the very first FNAF game. In the office, we'll have to stop the animatronics from getting past the doors, as we continue popping balloons and hitting targets. We can even get jump scared within the minigame, which is getting too meta for my taste. When restarting this level, I moved the camera beyond the wagon and found something pretty cool. The office environment is currently occupying this open space, and inside of it, we'll find several balloons and targets hovering below the rest of the assets. Currently, the main stage objects are present behind the curtains, and off to the side, we'll find Foxy and his pirate cove clipping through the wall. On the main stage, we'll eventually get the option to shoot a target on each of the 3 animatronics present. After landing a shot on one of them, they'll slide down and behind the foreground so we can't see them anymore, but they'll remain here indefinitely. After this section is over, we can watch as the next set slides into place and the old one moves outside the map. Each of these locations move at the same time while the curtain is closed, making the swap unnoticeable from your usual perspective. Now, with the office loaded into the main play area, we can watch as the animatronics appear at the doors. The second they arrive, the cutout will instantly warp behind one of the office doors and remain there for a moment, allowing the player time to hit the target and close the door. If you don't hit the target in time, a jump scare will take place and block you from getting points for a bit. So the way these scare sequences work is a lot more interesting than you'd think. Directly beneath the play area, we'll find what looks like a flat line stretching across the ground. When a jump scare takes place, this line will quickly move upwards and expand into the giant black screen that covers the gameplay area. And on it will be the animatronic who got to you first. After filling with static, this screen will then turn blank again as it shrinks back into this tiny flat shape. Before moving on to the next level, I tried deleting the curtain before starting the minigame in hopes of watching things play out from your regular perspective. Once the game started though, nothing happened. There were no targets, balloons, or anything else moving on the stage. Plush babies still spawned, but there was absolutely no way to gain points or move on to the next stages, effectively soft-locking my game. Giving this area one more reset, I deleted the whole cart this time instead of the curtains, and surprisingly, the minigame played completely unhindered. It's actually easier playing this way, since there isn't anything to obstruct the balloons as they float up and out to the play area. We can also watch as the other areas move into the level, which is pretty cool. Also, right above Dreadbear is a pair of floating marionette arms. These aren't activated during gameplay just yet, so let's jump into the next hard mode level where they do make an appearance. In the FNAF 2 minigame, all 3 carts will become active as you attempt to get as many points as possible. To do this, you'll check the cameras using your Fazer Blaster as you keep an eye out for animatronics, shooting these balloon monstrosities with your dart gun as they appear in the vents beside you. During this level, the puppet hands I mentioned earlier keep the Dreadbear meter at or below half, which means you'll have very little room for mistakes. At the end of this level, a fire breaks out and begins burning everything to the ground, including Carney. Jumping back in time, I started to explore the area to see what I could find, immediately stumbling across a Balloon Bonnie, and who I think is Balloon Boy. I'm not positive that's who this is supposed to be, but it's the best guess I can muster. It turns out these characters are stored behind these side carts and within the vents until they're moved into the player's sight. As you can see, this vent has Toy Bonnie, Mangle, the Cupcake, and a cutout of Toy Chica, all crammed inside. There are also multiple copies of the children who appear in the side areas. There are some currently laying flat waiting to activate, and others that are stored upright beneath the wagon. They'll pop up occasionally as a way of earning points, but for now they remain dormant and out of sight. In the center play area, we'll find a bunch of different assets stored here and waiting to be used. The player's desk, the office walls, and the back hallway area are all different layers placed in front of each other. Off to the side, we can find Withered Foxy and the puppet hanging out back here as well, but not much else. Mangle appeared in the vent on the right shortly after the game started, and we can watch in slow motion as the darts make easy work of them. Glitter and balloon pieces rain down as Mangle's various pieces explode into a rain of plastic and defeat. It's only a carnival game, but yes, it is that serious. Similar to the previous minigames, we can find several screens that appear within this hard mode level stored out of bounds. The prize corner and camera interface are placed directly outside the play area on the left, and next to this is an image of the Give Cake minigame from FNAF 2. It's placed just behind the cart on the left side, and there's some more children's sprites out here as well. At the end of the level, the entire area becomes engulfed in flames, including our friend Carney. This fire starts off super small and grows in size as more fades in over time. eventually overtaking most of this location as the game comes to an end. We can now head into the final Fazer Blast minigame, the FNAF 3 hard mode level. This level is by far the shortest and most simple. All you have to do is fend off Plush Baby as you use all 3 tools to slowly disassemble Springtrap. The entire level is burnt to a crisp, and the obstacles make it hard to effectively attack our enemy. After finishing him off, he'll jump scare you, and Glitchtrap's hand appears in the ball basket to hand us some victory cake. With the lights on, we can see the carnage this fire wrought upon this area a lot better. The wagons are completely destroyed and unrecognizable, and not much better can be said about Carney. He's been roasted like a passive-aggressive marshmallow, and I'd feel bad if you weren't heckling us this entire time. Our horrifying adversary Springtrap is also loaded in as soon as we start the minigame. He's just chilling behind Carney at the moment, and somehow he's almost scarier as a static cutout. From another view, we can watch as he teleports around this level, instantly warping between locations as we attempt to break him apart. I'm not sure if this destroyed version is more or less creepy than the fully intact one, but either way, they're getting Fazer Blasted. After landing the final hit, Springtrap will warp in front of the player as the jump scare plays out, falling backwards onto the floor as Glitchtrap's hand extends from our basket. If we trace the arm back to its origin, we'll find that it simply comes to an end inside the basket, and it's of course not attached to anything inside. After taking the cake, which is originally a plushie during your first playthrough, his hand will then retract back into the ball bucket and clip through the table. Once it's under the table and out of sight, it will unload completely. And with that, that's everything I found hidden behind the scenes and off camera in Help Wanted 2's Fazcade Minigames. Remember to snag Dying Light 2 for 60% off before January 2nd by clicking the link in the description below. Thanks again Techland for sponsoring. Thanks for watching, and cheers!